In March 2026, the Kremlin accidentally uploaded an unedited video of Vladimir Putin coughing repeatedly, struggling through a recorded speech. They caught the mistake. The video was deleted within hours. A clean version with the coughs removed was uploaded in its place. Think about what that means. The most powerful authoritarian state on Earth, a country with nuclear weapons aimed at every major city in the West, is so concerned about its leader's physical appearance that it edits his coughs out of official footage. Here is the question that video raises. If Putin is fine, if he is the vigorous, in-control strongman the Kremlin needs the world to believe he is, why is someone editing his coughs? And here is the deeper question, the one that actually matters for your security. If the man with his finger on Russia's nuclear button is physically deteriorating, psychologically compromised, or operating under a medical condition that distorts his perception of reality, how does that change everything about this war? Stay with me for the next 14 minutes, because today we are going to do something that most news programs are too cautious to do properly. We are going to look at the actual medical and psychological evidence, not rumors, not tabloid speculation, but peer-reviewed research, Pentagon studies, and the assessments of named neuroscientists and physicians. And we are going to ask the question that every Western intelligence agency is asking right now behind closed doors. What is actually wrong with Vladimir Putin? And what does it mean for a war that he is currently losing but refusing to end? 4 things you will understand by the end of this video. 1. The physical evidence. What doctors and scientists have actually documented about Putin's body. 2. The psychological diagnosis. What the Pentagon concluded in a classified study. What neuroscientist James Fallon said after years of research. And why it matters for how the West responds. 3. The cover-up. How the Kremlin is hiding whatever is actually happening, and what that concealment itself tells us. And 4. The nuclear question. If a man with a documented neurological condition and possible psychopathy controls the world's largest nuclear arsenal, what does that mean for the rest of us? Let's get into it. Let's start with what is observable, because before we get to psychology, there is a physical story documented over years by named scientists that the Kremlin cannot fully suppress. The first documented medical observation comes not from tabloids, but from the British Medical Journal. In 2015, researchers at the Department of Neurology at Radboud University Medical Center in the Netherlands published a peer-reviewed analysis of Putin's gait. They identified what is called a gunslinger gait. Putin walks with his left arm nearly immobile, pinned to his side, while his right arm swings normally. This asymmetric arm movement, the researchers noted, is a recognized neurological indicator. Now, the Kremlin's explanation was KGB training. Special forces operatives are taught to keep their gun arm free. Some neurologists accepted this, others did not. But here is what happened next. Over the following decade, additional physical observations accumulated. Video of Putin gripping a conference table with unusual force during meetings with defense officials, hands white-knuckled, body rigid, led neurologists including UK neurogeneticist John Hardy of University College London to acknowledge in his words that Putin did not look well, even while stopping short of a formal diagnosis. In 2022, intelligence sources within the Five Eyes Alliance, the intelligence-sharing partnership of the US, UK, Canada, Australia, and New Zealand, began circulating assessments of Putin's increasingly erratic behavior, combined with a bloated physical appearance consistent with steroid treatment. Steroids are used to treat several conditions, including certain cancers and autoimmune disorders. They cause characteristic facial puffiness. They can cause, in high doses, what intelligence sources described as roid rage, extreme irritability, impaired judgment, and aggressive decision-making. Investigative outlet Proect Media, an independent Russian publication, documented that from 2016 to 2019, Putin traveled repeatedly to his Sochi residence, accompanied by a thyroid cancer surgeon. Doctors, according to Proect sources, may have performed surgery on him in November 2016. The Kremlin denied it, but the Kremlin also edits coughs from official footage. Then came the March 2026 video, Putin coughing through an International Women's Day speech, the Kremlin uploading it unedited, the Kremlin deleting it, the Kremlin replacing it. BBC producer Ben Tavanner noted that multiple outlets believe the Kremlin accidentally uploaded the raw footage, suggesting internal disorganization around managing the presentation of Putin's health. Here is what the physical evidence does not prove. It does not prove cancer. It does not prove Parkinson's. It does not prove any specific diagnosis. Here is what it does prove. Something is being hidden. The concealment is active, ongoing, and resource-intensive. And the behavior, the rigidity, the puffiness, the coughing, the extreme isolation is consistent with a leader whose physical condition is a matter of state security. Now let's talk about the mind. Because even if Putin's body is functioning, even if every physical rumor is wrong, the psychological evidence presents a picture that is arguably more alarming. Let's start with the Pentagon. In 2008, the U.S. Department of Defense commissioned a classified study through its internal think tank, the Office of Net Assessment. The study was conducted by Brenda Connors, an expert in movement pattern analysis at the U.S. Naval War College. Its conclusion was unambiguous. Putin, the study determined, has Asperger's syndrome, described in the report as an autistic disorder which affects all of his decisions. The study noted that Putin's neurological development was significantly interrupted in infancy, possibly due to a stroke suffered by his mother during pregnancy. And here is the behavioral consequence the Pentagon identified. During crisis, to stabilize himself and his perceptions of any evolving context, he reverts to imposing extreme control. Read that sentence in the context of this war. A leader whose neurological condition drives him to impose extreme control during crisis is now managing the largest land war in Europe since World War II, a war that is going badly, that he cannot control, that is producing a crisis unlike anything his psychology was built to process. The Pentagon study cannot be confirmed without a brain scan. The researchers acknowledge this, but the behavioral patterns they identified, the rigidity, the inability to adapt, the extreme reactions to perceived weakness, have been documented by observers across 4 decades. Now let's talk about what neuroscientist James Fallon found. James Fallon is not a pundit. He is a neuroscientist at the University of California, Irvine, who spent his career studying the brain biology of psychopaths and famously discovered, through his own research, that he himself carries the brain pattern of a psychopath. After years of studying Putin's behavior, consulting with former heads of state, interviewing people who had dealt directly with Putin, Fallon published his assessment in 2022. His conclusion: Putin is a psychopath with sadistic traits. He is triggered by weakness. Fallon specifically identified what he called cluster B personality disorders, the most dangerous category in clinical psychology, including psychopathy and narcissistic personality disorder. The core traits Fallon identified: low emotional empathy, extreme manipulation, predatorial behavior, always scanning for weakness, a compulsive need to dominate. And here is the strategic implication that Fallon drew from his analysis, the part that should concern every NATO defense minister. Psychopaths like Putin are not deterred by strength alone. They are deterred by the credible, visible, sustained demonstration that weakness will not be rewarded. Every time the West hesitated, every time NATO delayed weapons deliveries, every time a Western leader suggested Ukraine might need to compromise, Putin read it the same way, as weakness, as an invitation. Now let's talk about what the concealment itself tells us. Because in intelligence work, the cover-up is often more revealing than the secret. Here is what we know for certain about how the Kremlin manages Putin's health information. The unedited coughing video in March 2026 was deleted and replaced within hours. Putin has maintained extraordinary physical distance from visitors to the Kremlin, tables measured in meters, isolation protocols that have no precedent in Soviet or post-Soviet Russian political history. He has been accompanied, according to multiple sources, by a permanent team of physicians on virtually all of his official trips. He avoids situations where his physical condition might be observed by independent medical professionals. When asked about his health at a 2025 AI conference, Putin said he was fine after a 2-day checkup, but refused to take a blood pressure test on camera. Refused. The most powerful man in Russia, a man who projects strength as his primary political identity, refused a blood pressure test. Here is what that pattern of concealment tells us. Regardless of what specific condition Putin has, the Kremlin believes that knowledge of Putin's real health would destabilize his regime. That is not a small thing. A leader whose health is a state secret is a leader whose legitimacy depends on the perception of strength. And a leader whose legitimacy depends on the perception of strength is a leader who cannot afford to show weakness, cannot negotiate from a position of compromise, cannot accept the kind of face-losing deal that would end this war on terms his domestic audience would see as defeat. This is why the health question is not separate from the war. It is central to the war. Putin cannot end this war without appearing to lose it, and a psychopath who is triggered by weakness, who has a neurological condition that drives extreme control, who is concealing a physical deterioration that would undermine his image of strength, is not going to choose the exit that looks like weakness, even if it is the rational choice. Even if it costs hundreds of thousands more lives, even if it extends a war that Russia is losing. Now we arrive at the part of this conversation that nobody wants to have, but everyone needs to. The nuclear question. Russia has approximately 6,000 nuclear warheads. It is the largest nuclear arsenal on Earth, and the command authority for that arsenal ultimately rests with one man, Vladimir Putin. A man who, according to a Pentagon study, has a neurological condition that drives extreme control during crisis. A man who, according to neuroscientist James Fallon, is a psychopath with sadistic traits triggered by perceived weakness. A man whose physical health is actively concealed by the most powerful intelligence apparatus in Russian history. A man who, in March 2026, had his coughs edited out of a speech. Now, to be clear about what the evidence does and does not support. The U.S. Congressional Research Service assessed in April 2026 that Russia almost certainly seeks to avoid actual nuclear use. The nuclear drills, the ones we covered in our last video, are assessed by the Institute for the Study of War as information pressure operations, theater, designed to frighten. Putin understands, at the strategic level, that nuclear use means the end of Russia as a functioning state. That constraint is real, and it matters. But here is the specific concern that military psychiatrists and strategic analysts raise when they model a deteriorating leader with the psychological profile we have described. The rational calculation holds until it doesn't. A psychopath in a losing war, whose physical health is declining, whose domestic legitimacy depends on the appearance of strength, who cannot negotiate without appearing weak, who is being pushed toward an outcome his psychology is incapable of accepting, is not making purely rational calculations. He is making calculations filtered through a neurological condition that demands extreme control, a psychological profile that reads compromise as defeat, and a physical state that may be affecting his cognition. This is not a prediction that Putin will use nuclear weapons. This is an argument supported by named experts, documented studies, and behavioral evidence that the person controlling Russia's nuclear arsenal is operating under conditions that no Western nuclear doctrine was designed to account for, and that the standard deterrence frameworks, the ones built on rational actors making rational calculations, may not be sufficient when the actor is not operating rationally. Here is the deeper truth underneath all of this. We have been treating this war as a conventional geopolitical conflict between a rational state actor pursuing definable strategic objectives. The evidence, physical, psychological, behavioral, suggests that this framework is incomplete. Russia is losing on the battlefield. Its offensive plans have collapsed. Its army has reached manpower equilibrium. And the man directing that war, the man who must ultimately decide whether to negotiate, escalate, or accept defeat, is, according to documented evidence, operating under a neurological condition that drives extreme control during crisis, exhibiting psychological traits consistent with psychopathy and narcissistic personality disorder, concealing a physical deterioration that the Kremlin considers dangerous enough to edit from official footage. This does not mean Putin is irrational. It means his rationality operates within constraints that Western decision-makers are not fully accounting for. It means the path to ending this war cannot simply be built on the assumption that if the costs are high enough, Putin will make the rational choice. Because a psychopath triggered by weakness does not always make the rational choice. He makes the choice that preserves his dominance, his control, his image of strength. The question I want you to sit with, not as a foreign policy analyst, not as a supporter or critic of any particular approach to this war, but as someone who lives in a world where one deteriorating, psychologically compromised man controls 6,000 nuclear warheads, is this: are the people making decisions in Washington, Brussels, and Kiev taking this seriously enough? And is the strategy we are pursuing of pressure, of delay, of negotiation, designed for the leader Russia actually has, or for the rational actor we wish he were? Leave your answer in the comments. I'm Nora Vance. Stay sharp.